Hello and welcome back. We are hanging out here a little bit. We've hit record, as far as you know, anyway. We've hit record after a series of edits and things like that. And we're thinking about our this is going to be the last episode other than a recap episode. So, this is the penultimate episode, as they say. I like using that word because it makes it sound more impressive than it is. So I'm thinking for our topic is let's do like a ride off into the sunset kind of thing. Let's talk about it's sort of like succession planning, but it's basically like when do you talk a little bit about like hanging them up and saying, okay, I'm done with this. Is what does that look like? And maybe thinking about things like retirement and things like that. And this will be an interesting because I'm not retired yet. I'm pretty sure you're not retired yet. So this isn't something necessarily that we have experienced as much, but I think it's some things that we can maybe throw some thoughts out there as we are, starting to get sort of towards that. But also we know some people that have, and maybe see where we can throw some things for people that are where they may need to start thinking about it now, even though it's 10 or 15 or even 20 years into the future. How's that sound?
I like that. Within that conversation, though, we haven't necessarily hung up our hats, but we have done side hustles that didn't work or weren't going anywhere, and we have looked at them and no one to shut them down and to pivot to something else. I think that works with this conversation. What do you think?
I think that's a good thing to add as well, is because there are going to be, it's like a little bit when to call it quits, because there is going to be something like that where it's like, okay, well, what happens if you're done with that side hustle, whether you move on to another one or you're retiring or you're closing it or whatever it happens to be. Um, I think that actually, and I think we can talk about that a little bit. It's like what happens when you're getting to the end of your journey in a business, as well as your journey as a developer. We can talk about both of those, I think, a little bit. Sound good? Well, hello and welcome back. We are building better developers. We are developers. This is the penultimate episode of this season. I just like using that word a lot. It just, like I said, it sounds cool. You always see like horns in the background or something like that, or a little confetti going off or whatever. My name is Rob Broadhead. I am one of the founders of Developerpreneur, also a founder of RB Consulting, where we help you take your technology sprawl and turn it into something that is manageable and gonna work better for you. We use simplification, we use automation, we use integration. We look at what you've got, where you need to go, and help you build the better vehicle to get there, the better solution to get from where you are to tomorrow and 6 months, 6 years, 60 years down the road. Okay, 60 is a little far because technology is going to change too much, but we try to make you as future proof as possible. In the world of good things and bad things, let's see, where do I want to go with it? Oh, good things. Let's start with my good thing is I'm working from home this week. I've got like a schedule that allows me a little bit more freedom during the day. I haven't been in as many meetings and stuff like that, which I guess is good in itself. But a bonus was I got like some rays of sunshine the other day, just yesterday, I guess it was, in the middle of the day. I wasn't in the middle of a meeting and I was perfectly set up to say, you know what? I can go knock out mowing the yard. So I was able to like take advantage, which is one of the values of working remotely, is take advantage of that and be able to get a couple of chores done at like the perfect kind of weather and time to do that. So I guess that's my good thing. Bad thing. Bad thing. But boy, I've had so much good lately. Bad. I may have to punt on the bad. Gosh, now I came into this trying to think of a bad thing, and I'm really struggling with the bad thing. What have I done bad lately? Um, bad thing. I'll give you a bad thing. This actually came out of a good thing. So sometimes you have a situation where you got to, like you have a customer sort of come out of the blue and they're like, hey, we've got to do some stuff. Cool. You dive in, let's do it. And it's not a let's get ready and then they just disappear. It's like you're working with them, you're doing some stuff, and you think it's going to continue, and you're like sort of ramping up, and then it's like, and it doesn't. And then suddenly they just sort of like, oh no, wait, we really don't need it. And it's not like getting laid off. It's not like, a project necessarily being canceled or anything. It's just like you thought that this was going somewhere else, or you were moving. It's like you had all the momentum and then suddenly it stops. And it's it's business. It's what it is. It's just like, oh, okay, well, we're done. It's like you're working to the end of a project and it's like, bam, okay, we're done. And it's just like, it's jarring because you're moving forward really fast on this thing. And all of a sudden you're done. And it's like, whoa, it's like you hit a brick wall. So that's my bad thing is I just had one of these happen where I was like, okay, I got to get all this stuff done. And I was like, oh, wait, no, I don't. It's done. Like, all right, moving on. Also moving on in this podcast, we're going to go talk to Mike on the other side and allow you to introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, my name is Michael Balash. I'm one of the co-founders of Developerner, Building Better Developers. I'm also the founder of Vision QA, where we help small and mid-sized companies, clinicians, help them with their technology stack, their software, and actually help them with existing development cycles or stacks as well. We can help you really ramp up your development cycles, reduce bugs with utilizing automation testing and defining what it means to test your software. Good and bad. I'll start with the bad because your good was the fact that you were able to actually get out and mow the lawn. I have not been able to. I have had rainy days every chance I get to try and get out and do my chores in the yard. And when you own a large stake of land, that can be very time consuming and doesn't work. Good side, however, is the weather's starting to get better. We're starting to get into fall. I won't have to do that very much longer. And I get a few months off from that. So good and bad.
Nice. That's a good pair there. This episode, because it is the penultimate episode, we're going to talk about ending your developer journey to some extent. This has been the developer journey, so we are reaching the end. Now, we want to talk about this in two different ways that you end your journey. There is the ending your journey that you're riding off in the sunset and you are no longer caring about being a better developer because you are wrapping up your career. We are not there yet, so there's going to be just sort of like some things that lessons learned from other people, and so take it with a big grain of salt or a big whole salt shaker of salt. The other thing is when you're ending, it's not a career, but it's a path, whether it's a side hustle, whether it is, actually, I think we also want to talk about, because this is a very good one, is ending a job. When you're moving from one job, maybe into your side hustle becomes full hustle, or going from one job to another, wrapping things down. And I want to take this, we're going to look a little bit more, not just at like a project level, but things like, okay, we're moving on to the next thing. And some of the key things I want to this almost feels like harping on things because it's a lot of the stuff that we've talked about throughout the season. One of the things you want to be able to do when you are wrapping something up, whether it is actually a project, whether it is moving to a new job, or whether you are looking to, stop your developer career, to close the door on that, is to document, is to make sure that you have what you use on a daily basis for sure. It's not like, how to code, but it is like, what are some of the processes there? What are some of the key things? Like, what are the servers that you connect to? Maybe even usernames and passwords. And particularly one of the things that becomes a problem a lot is emails that are automated that go to you. And this is thinking usually that it's going to be handed off to somebody else. If you're just going to shut everything down and you don't care if anybody ever talks to you again and none of your work is ever going to be carried on, then you don't have to worry about this. It's very simple. You shut the laptop off or your desktop, you unplug it right off in the sunset. That almost never happens. There's almost always needs to be some continuity of knowledge and of processes. All the more so when you are leaving a company. Now, leaving a company, sometimes they're going to be very much a part of what you can or should do, because sometimes it's things like, hey, if you give notice, they're just like, go away. You gave 2 weeks notice, but you're not going to show up here again because of security and stuff like that. There could be other reasons around it as well. But if that's not the case, or if you know it's coming, just make sure that you are putting things in place, that your house is in order so that you can hand the keys over to somebody else and say, here you go. Along with this is going to be, like I said, it's going to be things like documenting things. It's going to be looking at who are the contacts that you deal with to make sure that people have contact information for those contacts. Emails that come in, making sure that the people that email you know that you are going to be handing that off. A lot of times this includes some sort of a call or something like there were a meeting or something where you're like, hey, Rob is leaving. Let me introduce you to Mike. You're his problem now. So you're going to do it a little better than that. But something along those lines, so that you can do a handoff. And you can't hand off by being like, it's not a dump a bunch of stuff on somebody's lap and go, here you go, bye, have fun. It is actually handing it to them so they can look at it and making sure that they can be successful picking up where you left off. Those are the kinds of things you want to do because you put all this work into this, whether it's a company, whether it's a project, whether it's, whatever it is, whether it's your entire career. Don't screw it up or tarnish it by not allowing it to be handed off properly. Now, when you're getting into these things, take a look at, like, also, if you're coming into, like, if you're winding something down or you've got a company that you want to close, make sure that you are signaling to customers and things like that. And this is a good example. Is there's a company that I deal with. I'm on one of their mailing lists, and I just got something that said, hey, by the way, we're going to close down at, I think it's the end of the year. And they sell products, physical products. So it is them saying, we're going to be closing down. We're not going to be making those products anymore. If you need those products in the future, they didn't say, here are links, but they said there are other people out there. There are other providers or other vendors. So go check them out. We know they're out there. See what you like, see what you don't like. So they didn't even have to recommend even, but they just said, hey, we're giving you a heads up. This is what's happening so that the customers don't feel like they were hung out to dry. Like, for example, actually, I think Michael was there one time. We had, we had a lunch on a Friday at a restaurant, and we came back like Monday or Tuesday to have lunch there again. The business was closed. Friday, nobody knew. Everybody was like, hey, let's go. Fine, great. We come in a couple of days later, we're like, there's nobody in there. The doors are locked. What the heck? They should be open. And we had to dig around, I think, to figure out that it was closed. So don't do that to your customers. Let them know. And that includes your boss. And I know there's always politics and personality and all that kind of stuff. And I hate this job or whatever it happens to be that could come up. Try to take the high road and try to do all the right things to make sure that you're making the right notification. Even if you offer to say, hey, I'm going to I'll work on I can cross train the next person or something like that. Even if the company doesn't really offer you the opportunity to do that, try to take advantage where you can, whether it's, if you can't go to that person and spend a little time with them, even if it's like have a lunch or a dinner or something to hand stuff off, at least put, again, documentation together so that when they sit down, you can say, here's a folder. This is what you need to know. You also have been through more than a few changes in your career. So what are some of your thoughts on these?
Yeah. So let me start with the developer journey side of things. So throughout my development career, like you said, there are times when you give notice and you're just walked out the door for security reasons. I've worked for a couple companies where you had to have security clearance to even get into the building, and then you had to add even more security clearance to get into certain areas. If you're in one of those situations and you're going to be leaving, you definitely if you want to make sure that you leave in good standings, which you almost always should, even if there's friction or tension within a job. You never know who's going to go somewhere else that you're going to go to in the future and find out you're blackballed. So always try to think in terms of software, always try to leave things in a better place than when you started. So in those situations, like you said, like Rob said, try to document what your tasks are, because your job role from the day you started to today is probably not the same job role. And if you're in a very small company or a small team, if they need to replace you, if they were to go out and just dig out the old job requirements and try to go hire someone, they're probably not going to get what they need from the next candidate to fill that position or to do that job. So maybe kind of write down your tasks, what it is that you do daily, what is required to do your job. And sometimes that may mean, they have to go hire more than one person. Another time I was transitioning, loved the company, really didn't want to leave, but due to financial stipulations with the company, there really was no more upward momentum. There was really nowhere to go. And you just hit that ceiling. And it's really hard because they tried to find something else for me to do to keep me, but they're just financially much better offers out in the industry. I had to leave. However, I did give them 30 days notice because this was one of those situations where I was the linchpin. I was the only person who had been doing this task for 7 years. No one else in the company knew what I did or how I did it. So in that situation, I literally had to document everything I did. I recorded videos. I transcribed everything. I sat down with multiple team members to walk them through the process. And I really do feel I left them in a better place than when they started. One, they had almost minimal automation of their application suite. By the time we left, we went from maybe a couple hundred test suites to over 20,000 automated tests running against their system. But I built that entire framework and that for that company. So really they had none of this information. So I documented it all. I put it all together. The best part was, which to me was kind of a mixed blessing, was 6 months later, I'm still friends with my old manager. And he was like, we had to hire 2 people to take over for your task, but you left us in such a good place. They were able to just sit down, pick it up, and roll with it. And that's really a good thing to hear if you're handing off a project. Even if you're within the company, moving to a different department, if you really liked what you did, you don't want it to crash and burn. You really want it to succeed. So those are some of the good success stories. Bad success or bad stories are when you do give that notice and they literally walk you out the door and you're in that kind of position. It's really sad because and I've heard this more than one time from people I've worked with before. They had no idea what it is that you did. By walking you out the door, they literally shut down the project because they didn't take the time. They didn't think. There was no conceptual thought to why you left or what it is that you were doing. Do we have everything that we need? So from a business perspective, if you are going to walk someone out the door or get rid of someone, make sure you know what they do. Passwords, emails, things of that nature, like Rob mentioned. Now, transition out of our development journey, out of working for a business to side hustles and working in your business if you're doing this full time. From a side hustle perspective, at one time, and Rob, I think we were working IT for recruiters or something else at that time, but there have been times in my career where I've had multiple side hustles going at once because I wanted to try different things and they didn't quite fit into one hat. So I actually spun up 5 different companies one time for different things. I helped my wife spin up an online store selling knives. I did a kind of a fan-based Doctor Who website that it just finally shut down. I actually had it sitting around for 3 years. I was doing nothing with it, thinking, boy, why am I paying for this if I'm not doing anything with this? And you get to that point where you forget about it. You probably need to shut it down. But before you do shut some things down like that, if you took the time to write something or have some intellectual property, make sure you back that up because you want to make sure you have that, because if someone steals that, you want to make sure that you can say, hey, no, that's my property. You can't take that. On the flip side of that, because of COVID, and because I've had some customers that have aged out and some have passed, you will run into situations where companies that you work for shut down. But they'll want you to help them shut down because sometimes you can't just turn the lights off and walk out the door. If you're a financial institution, a healthcare institution, you still have to hold on to patient records or certain financial documentation for years after a company closes. So if you're in the process of helping them shut down or shutting down yourself, these are some things you need to think about and actually plan for before you just turn the lights out and walk away. So you need to kind of have an exit strategy for a business or helping a business kind of shut down.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, your thoughts?
Yep. A couple quick hits because there's a lot of places we can go with this. One of them is that when you're shutting something down, there's 2 things to consider, and this sort of goes to this making sure that you have backups and things like that. Is there is for your purposes and then also for your customers' purposes. Now, a lot of us do software and things of that nature. So you do need to consider things like, do I give a repository or source code over to a customer? Do I give them the keys to the kingdom for, like my GitHub account or something like that? Or do I share it over? Do I make them an administrator? Are there servers that maybe you have that they were leasing through you or something like that? You need to move those servers somewhere else for them, or allow them to have full access while you're doing that. Now, you don't want to be the jerk, which a lot of people had, where you just shut it down and now they've got to go figure out a way to do all of that moving themselves. You want to allow them as much as possible access so that even though you don't have to do it for them, it's ideal if you give them some way to transfer out. If not, at least give them full access so they can do so as much as makes sense for your business. Now, there can be, there's issues around all of that. So take each case on a case-by-case basis. You also want to make sure, like Michael mentioned, if you have any IP, any intellectual property, if you're shutting down a business, if there's anything that you put into that, then make sure that you have a way to access that again. For example, when we shut down IT for Recruiters, we had numerous things that we had put together. There were classes, there were blog articles, there's a whole bunch of stuff. We still have somewhere, not exactly sure where it is. I could find it if I really needed to it. All of that site, we have the database backed up. We could go respin that site up if we needed to. I've actually done it once or twice to find like a couple of things. We also have all of our documentation is sitting out on an archived folder somewhere, so we can go back and get things. And we actually did in a couple of cases, I think it was a couple of years later, we came back and actually repurposed some of the lessons that we had and helped another company build out some of their lessons based on that. So you want to do that. When I shut down the Blessing Not Stressing podcast, I still have same thing. I have the database for it. I have the site. I could spin it back up if I needed to. I also made sure, one, that because it was a podcast, I actually left the podcast side of it up for quite a while. So even though it had been dormant for a long time, it was still live in Apple Podcasts, even though I think they showed, in a lot of the other podcast places, they showed that it was not active because there hadn't been an episode released in a certain amount of time, which is funny because if you listen, for example, to Hardcore History, Dan Carlin sometimes will go a year before he turns another episode out. It's still active, but it will show as not active because he hasn't cranked one out recently. But when I did that, I also copied down the audio for every single episode because I wanted to make sure that I had backups of every one of those if I ever, for whatever reason, ever needed to go back to them. Because you may want to repurpose stuff. This is particularly if you go from one company to another. Now, there can be licensing and legality issues and stuff like that it may be that what you built you didn't own and you're not allowed to do that. But for the stuff that you did, definitely you want to do that. And a lot of times you need it just, again, it's almost CYA, but it's also just to go back. If somebody a year later says, hey, how did you do that? Or what did you do? Or who did you email or something like that? It is useful to do that. That includes, like if you're Outlook, extracting the little Outlook files, your little inbox or whatever, I forget, PST files, I think is what they're called. If you're whatever, wherever you can back up and store and archive that information. And it may be that you don't hold on to it, but put it somewhere there to say, hey, by the way, this is my, maybe it's your personal network drive out there at the company to say, here's all of my stuff. So somebody knows where to go for it. Also like I said, be prepared to hand some of that stuff off, maybe have a meeting where you can say, here's all the code. And by the way, here's the build scripts. Here's how you build it. Knock yourself out, something along those lines. That's quite a bit, but you probably did quite a bit. Potentially you spent years working there. So there could be quite a bit going on. And there are people that I've talked to that have been involved with where I've helped people shut down their career. Sometimes in a couple of cases where it was basically their entire career was spent in this company, 20, 30 years, and ramping things down and helping find the next person to replace them. So, I've watched this, and a lot of it does come down to, unfortunately enough, a lot of it comes down to documentation, comes down to really making yourself, if you're that person, making yourself sit down probably on a daily basis and get your thoughts to paper about the things you do. And it's helpful if you've been there a long time. If you're looking at retiring or shutting a business down, take months, spend a quarter or more ramping things down, making sure that you're taking care of this stuff. Payments are being dealt with so that you can shut all that stuff down. So if there's licenses and stuff like that, those are all being closed down and they're not auto renewing, all of those kinds of things. That being said, we are wrapping up this penultimate episode of this season. I could say that at least one more time. And I want you to we're not done. This is not our last season. We are going to step into the next season. We're going to have lots of nuggets and challenges and key things to do each episode, a good action item for building a better developer. How do you, for you, whoever you are, you too, that guy in the back, all of you people, including us, what are things we can do to become better developers? And there will be these shorter term and longer term things. A lot of it's going to be about habits and things of that nature. So shoot us an email, info@developreneur.com. You can contact us out on developreneur.com. There's a contact form. You can check us out on X @developreneur, DEVELPRENEUR. You can also check us out. We have a Facebook page. We have LinkedIn. We have a lot of those things. You can leave comments out on YouTube. You can leave comments wherever you get your podcasts. You can leave those comments out on our site. Whatever you want to do it, definitely give us your thoughts. What are some things maybe that you have, if you have some suggestions, or some things that you would like to say, hey, I struggle with X, and I would like, not Twitter, but like I struggle with this thing, and I would like to figure out how can I better do that? How can I become better at it? And we're going to have all kinds of suggestions for that related to wherever you are in your career and how you can better yourself. That being said, why don't you go out there and have yourself a great day, a great week, and we will talk to you on the ultimate episode for this season. Have yourself a good one. Bonus material.
So one thing I want to throw out that I didn't touch on during the podcast is if you are shutting a business down or you're shutting a project down, make sure that if you are keeping your intellectual property or you're keeping any of your media, your emails, things of that nature, one, make sure that when you store it somewhere, you're storing the unsecured information. There has been a couple times where I've backed up my email messages and it's tied to an Exchange server, and even though I've exported them, I still can't get them. So make sure you export them to a non-secured folder. Secondly, make sure you back up your media to media that's going to be around if you want to keep looking at it or maintaining it. I found floppy disks that I had information on, and I had to go buy an external floppy drive, thank God, to get something that was a little outdated, but was actually something really cool I did back in college that I wanted to pull out and show my daughter. Well, that took about 3 months to get that one little file and some additional costs. So make sure you store it on media that is going to be around. If you need to, old-fashioned printer, print stuff out. That lasts for quite a long time, unless you have a fire or water damage. CDs, a little more fuzzy, since a lot more computers these days don't have CD or DVD drives or even Blu-ray drives. Definitely hard drives are pretty much de facto. They've been around for a long time, and there's a lot of adapters and that for using those. You have external drives, things of that nature. Be careful of cloud backup. Some cloud backups that were around 10 years ago are not around today. So be very cautious about that. So if you back anything up, I recommend to do it to something physical and something that is maintainable, or at least will be around for at least 20 to 30 years. Because depending upon where you're at within your career, you may need to transfer that at some point to maintain that. But if you're retired, that's probably about all the time you need to really care about it, because your kids aren't going to pick it up and they're not going to care about it. The last thing I want to touch on is if you have any type of GitHub or repository where you have source code that you have put a lot of effort into, but you're done with it. think about open sourcing it. Maybe find another contributor, put it out, basically put it out there. Hey, it's like, hey, this had a good run. Anyone that wants to continue it, give it to the community and let it thrive. You never know. It could turn out to be the next big blockbuster, or you might save someone a headache down the road by them looking at it and say, hey, this is exactly what I need. Let me go tweak this. And hey, you just made someone's day. So just some ideas to kind of keep your legacy going, or at least keep a backup of it in case you ever need to revisit it.
I'll keep it short and follow it up with the version control thing is, well, two things. I guess I will go back. Definitely keep an eye on your media devices. I've done the same thing. I have done stuff. I just accidentally, I don't know why I raised my hand. It was like, I had my hand, I'm talking about my hands too much. I'm sorry. I'm just going to sit on my hands. I recently have gone back through because I've been doing some cleaning, and I've had some stuff. I've got 5.25-inch floppy disks. I have got the 3.5-inch hard disks, and I have what was called a zip drive, which would be one of those things. I have the disks, the drive piece of crap right now, and I don't think I could find one anywhere. So I should have at some point pulled off of those. I also was burning CDs, and so I do have CD backups, and I have literally just for such an occasion, and because I occasionally like to run music on my laptop or something like that when I'm running around, I do have a USB CD drive, so I can use that. And now it's USB, and I think I'm now going to have to change the plugs because I have Apple stuff and they keep upgrading these things. So you may have to do that. You may have to periodically check out your backups if you need them. If you're riding off into the sunset, you probably won't have to worry about it. If you're like thinking like Michael, like, hey, I might want to look at this 20 years from now, then you may have to continue to move your stuff forward. In a similar sense, don't try, whatever you used for your version control, back up pull it out and zip up, or however you do it, compress the source, or ideally don't even compress the source, put it somewhere where you can store it that is not within the version control system. I happened to actually back up a long time ago. I had an RCS version control piece. Actually, I also had a source safe, I think is what it was called, the old Microsoft. I had source safe stuff that I just backed up the whole kit and caboodle, the whole server, that piece of it. And then later, when I wanted to go digging it up, I had to go find the server piece of it to be able to connect to it, to be able to pull this stuff out and extract it all. And actually, at that point, I actually took all that crap and shoved it up into GitHub, because I'm like, all right, I'm going to put it into a Git repository and like get it out of the way. But be careful what you use. Like Michael said, be careful what you use to store your stuff, because if it's a technology, that technology might disappear. Cloud is great, but always you should have physical copies somewhere as well. And as I say this, I sort of panic because I'm thinking about all the code that I have out in GitHub and other places that I don't actually currently have a physical, other than my devices. I don't have other physical copies. So I may be spending a couple of weekends in the near future pulling stuff down and burning it to a disk or something like that. That being said, time to wrap this one up. We will come back next time for the ultimate episode of this season, the final one. We have finished our journey, and we're going to talk about that journey again, and maybe do a little bit of we'll do our, like a sprint. We're going to get to the end, and we're going to do a little retrospective, and then we will be into season 23. So as always, reach out however you feel like reaching out to us, even smoke signals. We'll figure it out. We'll get that information. That'll help us help you as we grow into this next season. As always, go out there and have yourself a great one, and we will talk to you next time.